Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hello, Jason. How's it going this fine Thursday evening?
You know, it's a good Thursday evening. It's a little rainy and gloomy, but there's a lot of things to talk about this week on the podcast. There's a fair bit going on, like as I guess we should kind of expect in the late May period of the calendar.
Yeah, we're well into the Canadian Premier League season. League One is kicked off. The UWS season gets underway tonight. So, yeah, it's the time of year that we are never short of topics to discuss. Excited to do another episode.
If you are a new listener, Scott, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
The YYC Soccer Podcast focuses on soccer in Calgary. We talk about it at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We discuss the teams and the players, and sometimes the coaches from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university, League One, and professional levels.
This week, we're going to focus on Cavalry and Foothills WFC for the most part. We're going to talk about the last couple Cavalry games. We're going to, including their draw with York and also their Canadian Championship match against the Whitecaps. We will preview their upcoming match against Valour on Sunday afternoon at Spruce Meadows. And yes, we're going to go into Foothills WFC and about their upcoming UWS season.
Yeah, we also have 2 interviews this episode. Last week, we talked to Lee Tucker, who's the head coach of Foothills WFC. And then just a few days ago, we caught up with Izzy Monck. We had her on the podcast for the first time. She is a member of that team who are currently in the middle of their opening match of the season. They're down in Las Vegas, and they have a very comfortable lead over the expansion franchise from that city.
I haven't checked in the last few minutes. It's probably maybe gone up, but it was 6-0 at last check. So Foothills is having a pretty easy time of it tonight. Pretty dominant performance from what we can see here.
Yeah, dominant in the desert. But before we...
there's the headline writer. Wonderful headline, yeah.
Yeah, but before we talk more with more detail about that program, let's start with Cavalry's most recent couple of matches. As mentioned, they had a very historic game against Vancouver Whitecaps the other night. Won 1-0, but despite getting the win at BC Place, they are knocked out of the Canadian Championship due to the away goals rule. Jason, did you watch the game the other night?
I did watch the game, and it was pretty exciting. And I've watched this team play all these years, these 5 years since their inception, and I thought that was one of the most leave it all out there, throw all the chips into the middle kind of performance I've ever seen them do. They really, really were out there putting in an effort, and they got the victory. They beat an MLS club in their own park, but they needed to get a second goal.
For the second time, right? Like, they've played 2 games against Whitecaps at BC Place, and once in 2019 and then again this year, and they've won both of those matches, which is pretty remarkable. 1-0 this time, an own goal kind of toward the end of the first half. Cavalry, yeah, like you said, they looked very motivated. They knew they needed to score twice, and they really went for it in the second half and put a lot of pressure on Vancouver. But unfortunately, they just couldn't find that second goal. Jesse Daly came very close, but Isaac Boehmer made a good save on his turn-in shot toward the end of the second half. Very reminiscent, if you remember, of the CPL final. I think Jesse Daly had a similar chance to score, and Tristan Henry made a good save on that occasion.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had forgotten about that until you mentioned it. But yes, I think there are a lot of similarities between those 2 plays. They played really, really well. I was not impressed with the Whitecaps in this match really at all. Cavalry came in with a plan, and they were motivated. And Willie Akiao on that first goal, an own goal, that was a nice little bit of work on his part there. But you really look at the team, and there were a lot of good performances. Marco Carducci, made a few big saves. And what more can you say about Dan Klomp? What did you think of his performance, Scott?
Oh, absolute superhero. I mean, I lost count of how many blocks he got, how many big tackles he made. It was one of the best games he's had in a Cavalry shirt, and he's had a lot of good games if you think about last year in particular. So big statement performance from a player who has said multiple times how his goal really is to make it to the MLS, and he really solidified the reasons for why he's good enough to play in MLS. I can't imagine that he's not on at least a couple of MLS coaches' radars at this point, given both how he played this week, but also his overall season last year.
Definitely. And I remember reading something in the off season where Klomp was interviewed, and he said that he's almost at the point now where he will have his Canadian permanent residency status sometimes in the earlier part of this year. So not only will he be appealing from a football standpoint, but for the Canadian MLS clubs, he would count as a Canadian player. He would not count against their foreign player quota. So I think he's done everything on his end to put himself in a position to move up. And now the only question is, when's it going to happen? What's the circumstances going to be like? Man, I'm going to miss having this guy around. He is great fun to watch. His days as Spruce Meadows are probably, unfortunately, numbered.
Yeah. I think Cavalry fans have gotten used to watching the team's best defenders move on, right? If you think about Dominic Sator, Karifa Yao, Mason Trafford retired, Jonathan Wielden retired to become a coach. Cavalry's back line has always been in rebuild mode, it seems. But yeah, Dan Klomp might be the best of all those players I mentioned in terms of how, important he's been to the success of this team. Amazing performance from him. But I also want to give shout outs to Charlie Trafford. I thought he had a very important role in midfield, and Fraser Aird on the wing. He's been playing well all season. His delivery has been top notch. So those guys I think deserve a shout out, but really no one really disappointed on the night from my perspective.
Yeah. And I think Charlie Trafford goes out there and he plays his game and he plays it well, and hate him if he's not on your team, but he's a real asset if he's on your team.
Last thing I'll kind of mention about this game is Vancouver Whitecaps head coach Vanni Sartini's comments in the post-game press conference. Very critical of his own team. He said that Cavalry deserved, at the very least, to have a chance to go through on penalties. He said that the away goals rule should probably be scrapped in this competition. Interesting sentiment. Yeah, he said that it was, I don't want to get the word wrong, but was it shameful or embarrassing? He said the Whitecaps performance. That was the adjective or the gist of it, from what I can recall.
He did. And then the next day when CF Montreal lost to Forge, that was exactly the word that the Montreal coach used as well. He said it was a shameful performance. And this has been a year where there have been some really strong performances by the lower division clubs against MLS teams. And it seems like the running sentiment is their coach shows up at the post-game press conference and talks about how it was shameful the way they played. I don't know. I saw today CPL Commissioner Mark Noonan tweeted out something about the effect that he was kind of offended by all that.
Yeah, I don't want to take anything away from Cavalry. What I would say, though, is like this tournament does have roster rules, right? Like you have to field a certain number of homegrown players. Is that...
There is a rule regarding how many Canadians you have to have on the pitch.
Yeah.
It's somewhat similar to the CPL rules. I think it's very comparable. I think you have to have a minimum of 6 Canadians on the field. And I don't know what the roster quota is like in your 18, but
I like the rule. I think it's a great rule for this tournament. I would say though that it may not necessarily be the strongest MLS teams starting 11 that the CPL teams take on, right? Like with Whitecaps, for instance, we knew that Ryan Gauld didn't get the start. Brian White was kind of another big name player for Whitecaps who didn't get brought on until the half. And that, I think that's a good place to segue and talk about their last regular season game, which was last weekend against York at home. I know you and I were predicting a Cavalry win and a really strong game from them. Ended up a 2-2 draw. Not the best performance from Cavalry in front of their own fans.
It didn't seem like Cavalry played how they very often do at home, where they were really confident and dominating. And in the second half, York really seemed to step it up, and the Cavs they got lulled into a little bit of false sense of security. If they just seemed like they were in a place where they were a bit complacent, and York was able to take advantage. Shortly after they got shocked back and they were down by a goal, they equalized pretty quickly. I don't know. What do you think of the game, Scott?
No, I think there were spells where York seemed more like the home team. I mean, they were more comfortable in possession. They were kind of pinning Cavalry's defenders back on their heels a bit. And yeah, they took advantage first half of the second half, getting those 2 goals. Yeah, and Cavalry, honestly, I think when it was 2-1 and I was like, oh, they're going to lose this game. And Malcolm Shaw rescued a point with a goal off a header, which had been coming, right? He'd had a couple of headed chances both in that game and in earlier games too. So kudos to him for putting one of those away to make sure that Cavalry got at least a point. No, I think you have to call that a disappointing result considering the circumstances. I think we could also talk about what happened from the York perspective just a couple of days later with Martin Nash getting the sack.
I guess in a way you could say it was surprising after their last couple of performances. They seemed to be somewhat positive performances, but then I think in the big picture, I think we all kind of knew that at some point the new owners of York were going to want to bring in their own coach and not stick with the old regime's coach. So it seemed like it was one of those things that probably was coming. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too much about the ownership situation in York. I haven't really read up on it that much. I'm aware it's happening, but don't know too many of the details. But at least in the interim, it looks like they're going to be coached by another guy with previous links to Cavalry, Mauro Eustachio, which I thought was a good opportunity for him. So Cavalry is still chasing their second win of the regular season. After 6 games, they have a 1-4-1 record. It's very reminiscent of their 2023 season form at the first half dozen games or so. Their next game is an important one. They're playing the 7th place team, Valour, who also only have 1 win on the season. I would compare the 2 teams' performances thus far quite differently.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, Cavalry has had some really strong performances overall, and they beat an MLS club, right? And they have looked good. The final results and the points haven't necessarily been there. Valour has, I think, from all accounts, not looked great in most of their games. And they, to their credit, they took advantage of a really struggling side in Halifax. They walked into Halifax, got 3 points. So they did have the ability to do that. And that's good for them. But I think for the most part, when you look at these 2 teams, you would say that even though the difference in standings isn't that much, Cavalry has had a stronger season for sure.
Valour is... They've got 3 points on the season. That win against Halifax last week was their first points of the season. Lots of defensive frailties. It seems like they've had 14 goals against, which is the worst in the league at the moment. They've only scored 5, so that's the second worst performing offense thus far. Yeah, I've caught just bits and pieces of Valour's games, and they really do seem to be struggling. I have a feeling Halifax will pick up their play pretty soon, but Valour I just see as a team that's going to struggle to not be on the bottom of the league standings a few months from now.
And I think this match is interesting in the sense that ordinarily it would be one of those games that would seem somewhat comfortable for Cavalry, a team that getting 3 points seems like it should be relatively straightforward. But, I don't know about you, Scott, but I think there's actually a lot of pressure in this game. Like, they kind of got to get 3 points, because if you drop points against Valour at home, how the heck are you ever going to catch up? So I think, weirdly enough, there is a level of pressure and tension in this game that might not have been the case if Cavalry wasn't exactly in the place they are on the table right now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And cup hangovers are a thing, right? So Cavalry has a very short turnaround to kind of get over the disappointment of getting knocked out of the cup and prepare themselves for an important home game. Because you're right, a win would put Cavalry up to comfortably, 4th, 5th place with 10 points. But at the moment, they are in the bottom half of the table. Yeah, I anticipate a Cavalry win, but I did the same thing last week and I was proven wrong. So we talk about the placements in the standings and the form and all of that, but they got to go out and get the job done.
I think these are 3 points they just can't drop at this point. Like, it's not fatal, but I think they're huge 3 points. I expect them to win, but yeah, it's it's got sort of a level of tension that this match might not have had.
All right, well, I guess it's a good time to transition to talk about Foothills WFC. I just pulled up their Twitter, and it looks like it was 8-0 as of 15 or 20 minutes ago. So not sure what the final score is going to be by the time everybody's listening to this. Seems like a very comfortable start to the season for Foothills WFC.
For sure. And in our interviews that we have here for tonight with Lee Tucker, head coach, and with midfielder Izzy Monck, we talked a little bit about what it's like to go in and play a team like this that you really don't know anything about. I think we'll kind of leave all that for the interview, but the answer for this match, at least, is even though they didn't know that much about this team in Vegas, it didn't really seem to matter too much.
So before we run those interviews, I guess we could just kind of talk about the context of the 2024 season for Foothills WFC. I think it's a really interesting campaign for the team, primarily because of the departures of two of their most important players from last year, those being Maya Jones and Grace Storty, but also the fact that Project 8 is coming next year. So for, I think, a lot of these players, the 2024 season is going to be an audition. They want to prove that they're good enough to make that step up. What do you think about what this season could mean for Foothills WFC?
Like, I think Maya Jones and Grace Storty not being on the team, like, those are just huge players. Like, that's not to diminish the other players that are still on the team, but they're hard to replace. But yeah, I also agree with what you're saying about it being an audition for Project 8. Now, when we interviewed Lee Tucker, it was actually last week. And in the interview, he makes a couple of references to players that hadn't been announced yet when we were recording. Those names are now out there. And they've picked up a few players who, they're not university players that are looking for something to do in the summertime. Like, they picked up two American players, Kylie Norcus and Murita Story. They're both Americans that have already played in Europe. They played pro soccer already. So I think they're players that are looking to prove themselves and get back into the pro ranks. So they have several players on their roster that kind of fall into that category. I think, Serena Dolan, who is from Nova Scotia, she's out of university, and I think she's played a little bit of pro. And Sarah Kinsner is, past her university career, but is still kind of looking for, I think, a chance at the pro game. And so this team is filled with a bunch of players that are kind of at that point. In a lot of ways, you could even say that this team has some level of similarity to the last year of the Foothills men's team coached by Tommy Wheeldon Jr., where you look at that team and that team was clearly built with the idea in mind that this team was going pro next year.
Yeah, when they had the likes of Marco Carducci and Nick Ledgerwood and Sergio Camargo. I know you mentioned that only a couple of names were brought up when we talked to Lee last week, but since then, like you mentioned, Serena Dolan has joined. She was with the Memphis program. Brooklyn Blake is another NCAA caliber player from the University of Nevada, as well as Anderson Williams from Texas A&M. They've managed to maintain some continuity from last year. Izzy Monck is going to have a real leadership role, I think, this year, and she touched on that in our interview with her. And then there's local players like Jaden Berg, for instance, who's with the University of Calgary.
So I think we'll move on and run these interviews. We're going to start off with our interview with Lee Tucker, who's the head coach of the club, and then after his interview, we'll run the interview with Izzy Monck. I'd like to welcome Lee Tucker to the podcast. Lee is the head coach of the Calgary Foothills entry in UWS. Welcome to the podcast, Lee.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
So, Lee, season is fast approaching. I'm very curious to hear about how preparation has been going and what the team's overall goals are for this season. Looking back at 2023, you guys had a really strong team and pretty good overall record, but unfortunately just fell short of the postseason. So I'm curious what success will look like for you as 2024 gets underway.
Yeah, I think, on paper you can look at it and say it's an impressive record last year and it built from the previous year. I think, though, as a group, we would probably reflect and say we felt like we underachieved last year. What can you expect to see this year? Another exciting group of players that are on the field showcasing their talents. We'll have a good mixture of top youth players and one or two that have been in and around the youth national teams, and then some more senior players that have had that experience in the past, as well as now some players that have been in the professional world that are coming into Calgary to prove themselves to a certain extent and maybe put themselves in the shop window for the pro team that launches next year.
Maybe we could next talk about sort of who's on the roster, and maybe we could even go sort of through the positions and stuff, and just sort of talk about, who's new, who's returning, and we can maybe start a keeper.
Yeah, we're really pleased to bring in an experienced goalkeeper that has had high-level experience as well, playing throughout Europe. So Lindsay Kitson will be our number one goalkeeper for this season. When we go across the back line, you'll see a couple changes. Obviously, what was great for us is that we were able to play a role in Grace Stordy moving on to the professional world with Braga in Portugal. So whilst that's great, it's obviously an opportunity now for somebody else to come in. We have a very successful U Sports player that's going to come in from Edmonton for that position that hasn't been announced yet. So I might be a bit reluctant to give you names today because we're going through our process of actually announcing the roster, and we like to leave a little bit of excitement as such for the supporters that are out there. Across the back line, continuing there though, Maggie Zaxko will come back in, and Maggie's been around the program for a number of years now. Same with Tori Martin, and they give us that, I guess, that more senior leadership style, and they're really important for the youth players and the young ones that we bring in. Brooklyn Colvin steps up from our League One system this time around, and Rebecca Grisdale will continue. And Rebecca's been with the program for the last few years as well, and is having a great career at Maine University in the NCAA. Moving into midfield, the sort of first couple that we've announced there, you'll see Izzy Monck that is returning, and Izzy's a player that is having a great career down in Memphis University and has been in around the youth national teams, U17, U20 sort of level. Sarah Kinsner, who is probably one of the most well-recognised Calgary Foothills youth players as such, or youth alumni players, I should say, from previous years, and has that experience not only as a pro, but also, again, in those youth national teams. Anna Hauer, and Anna comes back to us full-time this summer. So that's a great addition for us. We're really excited to see how she can fit into the group and the impact that she'll have in this league over the next coming weeks. And I think that's all we've announced so far. So you might see, a couple more today go out that would be with that youth sports sort of experience. There are 4 or 5 players that will be announced a little bit later that are coming from the professional ranks. And so, yeah, I'll leave it there for now and just keep everyone, wanting to check in on a regular basis.
I know you touched on Grace Stordy and the impact she had last year on the wing. Another key player last year, who's not with the team, of course, this year, is Maya Jones. So I'm wondering if you can touch on the challenge of replacing a player like her who provided so much of Foothills' offense last year and in previous summers as well.
First and foremost, I'll just say, how proud everyone is to see Maya earn that opportunity, and because she has earned that opportunity. And, we're just, I guess, excited now and wait in anticipation to see if she can make that next step into the senior national team, which we all believe she's ready for. So hopefully that happens soon. How do you replace a player like that? I'm not sure that you do, to be honest, and it's not something that we've really thought about. Maya, for me, is such a unique individual player, a 1v1 specialist, someone who can win games on her own to a certain extent. So it's not necessarily about replacing Maya. We celebrate her journey, and what we now do is look for the next player to come through. And we know that we've got some very talented players that can come in and equally have as big an impact as what Maya did, but you might just see that in a slightly different way. And we're good with that, and we'll evolve our playing style slightly, but still stick to our core beliefs. But it's an exciting time for the players that are coming into the program.
Your comment there about playing style was right on with our next question. I wanted to ask, how can you describe the playing style and strategy for this year? And if it's changed, how has it changed?
I'd say the style or philosophy remains. I'm a coach personally, and my teams, I want us to have the ball more than any other team we play against, and I want us to get the ball back faster than any team we play against. So everything that we do is built off hard work, but there's certainly a structure that we work from in the framework that we've built. but it's very much possession based, and we want to score goals. We don't want to go into games and be 1-0 and 2-1 and things like that as such. We want to pull away from teams. We want to put the ball in the net often, and that's what we'll be trying to do this summer. I think you'll see an exciting attacking unit and certainly a front foot approach from the group, and we will go after games, and we will go and try and win those games and win the championships.
If there are any particular opponents or games that you have circled on the calendar, I think Santa Clarita, for instance, is a perennial rival, but there's a new team coming to the division that maybe you want to touch upon as well.
Yeah, Santa Clarita have always been that team, that it's us and them historically, and it's a great game, and they have so many talented players, and several that you'll see that are in the NWSL right now, and they tend to produce players every year that go into that league. So very, very challenging to play against that group. All the teams present a unique challenge, is what I'd say. And you're right, there's a new team in this time around from Las Vegas. So whilst that creates some excitement with a great away trip as such, our responsibility is to go down there and win the game. And then when we come back up here, win the game. So we certainly respect all the teams that we play against. We'll try and do as much research as we can into the rosters and try and get an understanding of what we may face. But ultimately, what we'll do, certainly in the early weeks, is focus on us and how we can then impact the games that we're in with our style and our brand.
We actually just want to get an impression from you about UWS in general. Like, has it sufficiently filled a place in the development pathway? Like, have you been satisfied with that? And then how will it complement going forward? You alluded to Project 8. How is it a complementary setup?
Yeah, but I think the proof is there in the last few seasons. If you look at some of the individuals that have gone on from our team in particular over the last few years, just to use a few of the names, Alex Lamontagne, who's across in France right now, Tanya Boychuk, Kaylee Brooks, Sarah Lamilla, Maya, Grace, like the list goes on and on of players that have been a part of the team that we've had and gone on to the professional world. So it's played a key role. And, what it also has enabled us to do is bring in some of our top youth players, and not just from the Foothills program. We've also brought in players from other youth programs around the city as well to give them the opportunity to be exposed to that next level. And what that's helped with is actually support them on their journey as they go towards the youth national team. So it certainly plays a key role. How that looks moving forward, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think there's definitely a place for the UWS in the future. And again, it serves as a great opportunity for us to get very high level competition throughout those sort of summer months. And we'll have to wait and see how it links with Project 8 in terms of each team and each layer. But certainly there's a case there to say that it's a great opportunity for us to continue competing at a high level.
I'd like to welcome Izzy Monck to the podcast. Izzy is a member of the Foothills WFC UWS team. She's also a player for the University of Memphis Tigers during the university season. But yeah, we're going to chat about the upcoming UWS campaign with her. Izzy, thanks for coming on our podcast this week.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
So for listeners who maybe aren't completely up to date, can we just start by getting a bit of your background and your playing career and how long you've been with Foothills?
Yeah, for sure. So I started playing soccer when I was super young, probably 3 years old. As long as you can play soccer. I started playing in the north, just playing for local clubs. And then I moved to Foothills when I was 12. I'm now 19 and I've been with Foothills since. I play at the University of Memphis now. I've played for the U17 national team. Really looking forward to this next season with the UWS group. It's looking exciting.
Going into this new UWS season, first match coming up this week, how do you feel training and prep's been going, say, compared to previous seasons? Any changes, anything different you've noticed this spring so far?
Really excited. I think we have a really good group. We've had a lot of training, a lot of game prep. We've worked together already a lot. It's looking really good. Our team looks really strong. We look connected, and it's super, super, super exciting to go into our first away game this weekend. And this whole season looks like it's going to be really strong.
So before we turn the record button on, Izzy, we are talking about your history with the team, and you said this is your third year, but you've been training with the group for even longer than that.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you do you feel like you'll be taking on more of a leadership role now, especially now that Maya Jones and Grace Storty have moved on to play professionally?
Yeah, for sure. I think obviously I'm still one of the youngest players on the team, but that for me that doesn't mean that I can't lead and can't lead by example. For me, I don't need to be wearing the captain's armband to be a leader and to do the right things. And I'll obviously be one of the players, like with having those players gone now. I'll be one of the players on the team with like the most experience in the UWS league. So I think using that to my advantage and helping the team will be really important along with other veterans that have been playing for a while. But yeah, I do believe I will be.
Yeah, I noticed you were the first player announced this offseason.
Between playing in the NCAA, you come back in the summertime and it's a very short season, short chance to have a break. So you join the UWS team. What's your favorite thing about joining this team in the summertime and playing in UWS? Like I said, your off time is from NCAA is pretty short. So what do you like about coming back to this team?
Yeah, I think the competitive atmosphere for sure. I'm a really competitive person, and even in off season, like I want to get a step ahead and I want to keep working. Like a lot of people like take the summer off or play for a team that's not as serious, and I feel like this team is taken very seriously, and everyone throughout the summer takes it seriously, which is great for the competitive atmosphere, like I mentioned, and just like having this group around me where I can learn and get better over the summer so that when I go back to school as well, that I'm just that one step ahead kind of. That's what I would say.
How would you describe your individual playing style?
Yeah, for sure. I think it depends obviously what position I'm playing. I play multiple different positions depending on what team I'm playing for. But in general, I would say that I'm a very aggressive, organized defender who's very competitive and doesn't let the ball get through. When I'm playing in the midfield, I'd say very organized leader, versatile, and yeah.
What do you think the team's overall goals are, and what would success look like for the team this summer?
Yeah, for sure. I think we've had a lot of successful seasons. I mean, we're 3 times Western Conference champions, so obviously that's a good goal. Winning is just the biggest goal for sure. We've been in this league for a long time, unlike some of these other teams, so we need to show them that and show them that we belong in this league and that we deserve to win this league. Obviously, playing against Santa Clarita, they're one of the best teams in our conference, and they're usually the one that we go head to head with. And I think showing them that like we're here to bring it this year, and we beat them last year at home, and I think that would be a really important first home opener, would be winning that game. I mean, winning all games, of course, but
Yeah, that one's always circled on the calendar. We've talked about it on the podcast quite a bit. Other than Santa Clarita, there's like a new team coming, right? Las Vegas this year. How tough is it to play against a team that is new? I know that's probably you did that last year too, I think. But yeah, how do you kind of prepare for a team that you don't know much about?
yeah, I mean, obviously preparation's a little bit different and a lot harder because you don't have much video or information on the team. But going into it, knowing that we're going to play our style of game, knowing that we're going to play the way we want to play and that we're going to control the game is kind of the biggest thing. And we've been focusing on the little details and things that we need to do right in any game, really. And if we can get our details right, it shouldn't matter what the other team looks like or what team we're playing against. But yeah, for sure, playing against a new team, the preparation looks a lot different. But we have played Arizona before, we've played Santa Cruz before, we played LA before. So this away trip, our first game will be against Las Vegas. So it'll be different. We have no idea kind of who the other team is, but we played against Arizona and we know what we need to do best. So
Looking ahead into the fall, are you excited about the upcoming season going back down to Memphis? You want to talk a little bit about what your expectations are for that and what you're looking forward to?
I really look forward to this fall season. This is my third year, going into my third year at Memphis, and I've taken a leadership role, a big leadership role at Memphis, and I've grown a ton since I've gotten to Memphis. And I think like this year is really going to be a year for our whole team to prove in ourselves in the NCAA. Obviously, we did really well last year and the year before, making it to the Sweet 16. So hoping to do that and make it even further, at least to an Elite 8 would be amazing. We go a lot earlier than a lot of other teams for sure in the summer and get to work right away. So I think that's really important, and getting ourselves ready for the season and then having a strong season and end result, hoping to at least make the Sweet 16, hopefully make it even further this year.
Kind of looking longer into the future, beyond UWS and University of Memphis, what are your goals for your career? I mean, are you hoping to plan Project 8, or are you hoping to kind of follow in the footsteps of like Grace and go abroad? What are you kind of thinking longer vision wise?
Yeah, for sure. I want to play professionally for sure. Where I'm not sure yet. I mean, obviously it's amazing that we have a professional league coming to our country in the near future. I'll graduate in the winter of 2025. So kind of after that first season of Project 8. So if that means that I go play abroad first and come back, if that means that I stay playing abroad, or if I wait and I play just in Project 8, that would be the goal for me. Obviously just playing professionally. I still have at least a year and a half left to college. So I have some time to figure out kind of a plan, but for sure, definitely playing professionally.
Nice. And what's your degree in?
I'm taking marketing management.
We'd like to thank Lee Tucker and Izzy Monck for doing these interviews and taking some time out to chat about this upcoming season.
Yeah. So obviously they're going to continue their season after demolishing this Players FC team from Las Vegas this weekend, staying on the road to take on FC Arizona, a team out of Metro Phoenix, on Saturday. And then they have their home opener June 1st, and that'll be a big one against a perennial rival of theirs.
Yeah, Santa Clarita Blue Heat, a team which I think for the last several years, it's been a battle between the two of them to see who secures that one playoff spot out of the Western Division. So there's nothing like starting the season at home with your biggest rivals. So that's going to be Saturday, June 1st at Broadview. So that'll be a good one.
Yeah, and after that, they're back on the road for their following 2 games. So they don't play again at home until June 22nd. But after that, they finish with a 3-game home swing against Players FC on June 22nd, LASC on June 29th, and then FC Arizona on July 6th.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these matches, and obviously pretty strong start tonight. Can't argue with it. Arizona will be tougher because they're an established team in this league. So I don't know how much Foothills knows about them, but they obviously they have some level of familiarity, and more to the point, the Arizona team, they've been in this league, so they kind of know what they're dealing with when it comes to level. Because I think that's probably what likely happened to the Vegas team today. This level is new to them.
Yeah, so it should be a closer game on Saturday that we can expect. So I know one more thing we wanted to touch on before ending this week's episode is that there's a big announcement coming up on May 30th regarding Foothills' involvement in Project 8. Jason, you brought this up. Is there something you're anticipating to come out of this?
I haven't heard anything specific about what it could be, but I think it's going to be some details, maybe about who's going to be running this team. And I don't know, are they going to maintain exactly the Foothills branding? Is there going to be something different? Who knows? Maybe there could be talk about what the season looks like and where they're going to play. I think they're promising something, so we'll have to see. But one thing, we can't really look at the other teams in the league to see what they've announced, because nobody has announced really anything yet. Halifax, Toronto, Vancouver, nobody has started season ticket drives. No one has announced stadiums, although you would think with Whitecaps it would likely be BC Place, but all of these things haven't really been discussed yet. So I guess right now it could be many things, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. The expectation is this thing is starting 10 months from now, 9-10 months from now. So it's coming up quick. So and it's been more than a year since they announced this league was coming into place. So I think we're at that point where it's time to start revealing some stuff to the public. So I can't wait. Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to this podcast using all the usual podcasting platforms such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts. you can head over to our website at wowfcsoccer.com, and there's a lot more information there about how to subscribe using various other podcasting platforms, or how to leave a question or comment. By the way, I just wanted to mention, I think this will likely be the first podcast that we're going to have that is going to be available to listen to on YouTube. So that's going to be another avenue to listen to the podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter or Instagram at WowFC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.